Alright, welcome to episode 55 of What is Civilization Started Over. In the last episode, we had part 1 of the 7 Years' War, where we saw the parallelogram and triangle alliances start to fight against each other. I've also added in the Swedish and the Polish into their respective sides, which they've joined. The Triangle Alliance, of course, as you know, is made up of the Dutch, the English, and the French, and they are up against the Irish, Spanish, Savoyans, and Italians, and now Swedish. So yeah, they've been fighting it out across Europe and North America mostly. Well, entirely, never mind. So yeah, as you can see, the French aren't doing great. They're getting pretty pulverized. The Irish have been pushed mostly out of Scotland. The Swedish are kind of saving them though. And then in America, the Irish colony has entirely capitulated, apart from the Bahamas and some of Cuba, whilst the Dutch colony is losing some of its most important areas, and the English one's invading up into Sweden. So let's go here to Poland and look at what's going on here, because the Polish are in an interesting spot. I mean, the Swedish did not expect the Polish to join this war, and that's quite good for the Polish. So they start to move out into Swedish territory, trying to take the island of Gotland over here. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that right, but oh well. And into the just general Baltic Sea area. However, the Swedish, they're going to make a pretty good counteroffensive and push into the area towards Kaliningrad and also down towards Danzig. So this is very bad if you're Polish. They also start to push back up here in the north near Lithuania, Latvia, there we go. And yeah, kind of just around Germany. So the Polish Navy does pretty badly against the Swedish one, because Sweden is just far stronger. But you know, they're still giving it a go. The Swedish will also start an invasion into the northern areas of the Polish country, invading both these cities and this area of lakey bit over here. They protect this city, but the Polish aren't really going to invade over there. They also move around to the northern Courland, northern coast of Latvia and take another major city, but then the Polish actually set in and start defending, so that's good. Heading over to the western areas of this war, yeah, look at the Spanish Navy, oh my god. I'm also going to change the color of the Spanish country's invasion thing, just because I don't really think you can see it very well, and that's probably problematic. Cool. Anyway, yeah, so I've changed that. I don't know. The Spanish also have pushed back a lot of the French Navy. I didn't really update that, but they are getting pretty far into the Bay of Biscay, and they're also trying to move out the Navy further into the western regions of this bay to hopefully push up against the English, although they're not really that successful. Speaking of the English, they are managing to actually do some pretty good work. Okay, up here in the north, they recently, at the end of the last video, gained what was it? Naval superiority over the Irish and Celtic seas, and also the Swedish now fighting the Polish. There's less Swedish troops are defending up here in Scotland, so they do a pretty good counteroffensive in this area, and also managed to make a landing in two areas in Ireland near Wexford, Waterford, I don't know, one of those, Limerick. They're all kind of down there, and also south of Dublin, so that's pretty good. But no other landings are made. A few attempts, but no other landings. Anyway, we can also head on over to the west, because the English are also fighting up here in the north against the Swedish, taking this major city. The capital of the Swedish Quebec colony, I guess, is probably pretty far away. I'd say it's maybe like this city over here. So yeah, doesn't look like they're going to take that anytime soon, but they do manage to push pretty far into the Swedish colony, as the Swedish aren't defending it too much. They also have the support of the Polish, as we can move in the... Oh yeah, I didn't draw that, did I? Silly me. The Polish, because the Polish have their own little colony around here. And little is a good word, because it's not a big colony at all. And there's not much naval defense going on here, so it looks like it's a lot, but it's really not. So the Swedish are going to send out their small navy, which is literally just entirely in this area near Newfoundland, out towards the Polish colony to hopefully knock it out, because they do have claims on this area. So they do a pretty good job in doing that. However, they don't really start an invasion into the Polish colony, because the Polish are already doing that themselves, which is surprising. Surprising to say the least. The Polish have actually managed to invade a little bit, but it's kind of a lot of German people who want this stuff. And also, they're near the entire German colony, so that's kind of why. But they managed to get around over this area and start to push into the Swedish colony until the Swedish managed to defend. More Swedish troops get sent from America also to fight in Europe, because that's kind of more an important front. because the Swedish have just done something pretty amazing, which is make a landing in the Netherlands. So they've landed up here in the northern part of the Dutch country, which is a reasonably strong country. I think they're 12th in the world, I said. I mean, I could just check the power rankings, but they've landed in this area just west, in the western parts of Germany, and they're moving towards this sort of bay that's over here. And yeah, that's bad if you're Dutch. So they do manage to hold a defensive, but this is like the main area over here, I guess. Yeah, not good. As for the rest of America, we can see the Spanish are doing a pretty good job in a second. The Spanish are doing a pretty good job at pushing back the Dutch over here in Mexico, as they finally manage to start to clean up the Yucatan Peninsula, pushing them out towards these very outer areas of this peninsula, but not quite reaching this Gulf of Mexico area. The capital is this city right over here, so that's bad, because the Spanish are approaching this city very rapidly, and they might even connect up more with the Gulf of Mexico, which they in fact do, and they reach the coastal areas of this Dutch colony. I don't know. I don't know what to say. The Spanish also managed to, well, actually not there. They're not going to put their navy out there, but they do manage to put their navy out around in this area. They just won't really be able to get it over there. They could carry their ships, but not that easy. The Dutch, actually, they've got a lot of their navy around here near the Irish territory, as most of the Irish navy has been recalled or completely destroyed. So the Spanish are actually going to send their navy in to try and defend these areas. Going around to the southern part of Cuba, you probably can't really see the difference between these two navies. Whilst the rest of the Irish navy is taken over by the English. It's really an unfortunate story for the Irish, because they're stronger than most countries in the world, but they just really haven't fared very well in this war at all, and that's just based off who they neighbour. So the entire island of Cuba will fall, and the British will also conquer all of the Bahamas, apart from the bits which the Dutch have conquered, and the southern bits. So there's that. The Spanish are just holding on to a very small bit of Irish territory, and there. The Dutch are also going to give up some of their occupations here in the Irish colony, because they don't really need to have them, and they're also needing more troops to defend down in Mexico. They are also going to recall all of their naval ships around here in Louisiana, because that's a stupid place to be defending, and also take out their defenses from this region. Finally, I managed to talk. Good job, me. So that's helpful. Anyway, we can move back on to Europe now, because another country has just joined the war, and that country is actually going to be Germany. Germany is not a country who you'd often associate with being on the same side as Poland. However, in this war, they're actually doing that, which is really strange for a load of countries, especially the Polish, who did not see this one coming. But yeah, Germany will join the war on the side of those guys. So what the Germans will do pretty immediately is send their navy out into their small body of water which they can occupy. But yeah, the Swedish did not expect this to happen, so the Germans are going to have a pretty good offensive here in the southern part of the Baltic Sea. Also helping out the Polish navy, which has done pretty badly. The Germans will also start their own offensive into Denmark, an area which had very little defense. You can't see that. Very few defenses, because they don't really expect to get invaded by Germany. However, there's quite a few people living here. Look at the cities. So they don't make it too far before Swedish defensive forces stop them. And also in the west, Swedish naval people drop off and help to push back the Germans. Over here in Poland, they've been doing badly. That's good for the Polish, I guess. It's not. They lose a few more cities in the north, and the Swedish start to really rapidly move through, because they've made it now into spring, and in summer it was really hard to invade Poland. In winter it was really hard to invade Poland. But now it's moved into spring, and the Swedish are having a much better offensive, moving now into Kaliningrad and taking over most of Lithuania, and also some of Belarus. Actually now getting to core Polish territory, so that's bad. I love how let's just clarify. Yeah, that's bad. That's good of me. Well done. I think you can probably tell by yourselves. So yeah, the Polish have nearly lost all their navy. How the German navy will move in and try to protect some of their waters so they can concentrate it around some of these more important areas. The Germans also try to take over the island of Bornholm, which they entirely surround, and eventually, after a very long and costly offensive, they will take over this highly fortified island. So there we go. We can also move on back north, where the Swedish colony is having an absolutely terrible day. because the Germans have also just started their own offensive into the Swedish Quebecois colony. Of course, it's not Quebecois because they're not French. So they start to really make a huge offensive into the central regions of this area. There's not any Swedish people here, or just any people, because it's really cold. And they just live on the coasts and hunt beaver or fish or something like that. I don't know, Hudson Bay. What did we do there? Prince Rupert? We call it something silly like that. The English also managed to connect up with the Hudson Bay, as I was just talking about it, taking over some random islands and a few very sparsely inhabited cities across this German coastal area. The Germans wanted this stuff, but now the English are occupying it. They're kind of annoyed about that. The Swedish never actually made a landing here in Polish territory, which is bad if you're Swedish. So what we see happening is the Polish sending out their navy, which is fairly destroyed in this area. There's some ships left, and they just rebuild them and to go fight against the Swedish. They will... They send troops across the northern area of this river, St. Lawrence River, is that it? And move further into these territories, getting pretty close to the capital of the Swedish colony, whilst they also will be sending their... Oh, wait. No. I was like, it's the same colour, isn't it? Nope. Sending their navy out towards the island of Newfoundland, and I think that's Prince Edward Island. I'm not sure. I need to get better at islands. I was trying to research island names. Yeah, I need to know more island names. So they will take this island... Okay. Take Newfoundland, mostly, successfully, and in fact, Swedish troops just abandon it. However, they don't give full naval superiority over the northern part, because that would be a bad idea. The Polish would also take over this long island over here. Not that long island. The Germans have that. And yeah, now we can see offensives occur in the south, because the Spanish, they're having to withdraw some of their navy as well to go help defend the Swedish in the Baltic, potentially. As the Dutch start small-scale offensives into here, the Spanish also don't really care about the Irish Bahamas territory, so what they're going to do is just let the English go fight there, and they leave some like traps or bombs or something. I don't know, that's what I would do. So it's kind of more costly to take the Bahamas, but there you go. Cool holiday spot for the English. The Spanish have also managed to fully capitulate out the Yucatan Peninsula area of the Dutch colony, as they managed to push the Dutch completely out of there, and also take the capital of the Dutch colony. However, it's really starting to slow down over here as they get to the major population centers of this colony. So that's bad. And yeah, we can also return back here to the Baltic, because guess what? Another country just joined the war, and this time it's going to be Ukraine. That's not what you want to see. That's really not what you want to see if you are any of those guys. So we can... Oh, wrong there. Let's see. Yeah, so the Ukrainians, they are in their own alliance, which is... What is that? Oops. I'm confused now. I'm truly confused. Any layers? Yeah, you go. Give me a second. Yeah, the Swedish have their own alliance, which they don't control. It's a Turkish alliance. Yeah, they can join someone else's coalition. Of course, they don't have any important naval stuff, so their navy's just docked. Yeah, they try to like send it maybe over to the Polish to help them in the Baltic, and a few things arrive. There's the Dnieper River that goes that way, I think, and they start to send some troops out into the old lands of the Beige Country that was obliterated in episode 53, so not too long ago. They also send troops across, mainly, most of the troops go here, into the eastern parts of the Polish territory, pushing around and taking one major city in the south, and another one also kind of in the south, well, of this invasion or occupied area. They get pretty close into Latvia and Lithuania, and get up close onto these cities that the Swedish occupy, / own, I don't know. A lot of different ethnic groups in the Swedish Empire, but the Polish and the German navies are now doing a pretty good job in the Baltic as they start to push out towards more of these Swedish islands, and the Polish actually gain naval superiority over a few different areas here in Latvia, managing to retake all of their occupied lands, which is good. I did it again. We can also head over to the Dutch, because the Dutch are doing something pretty impressive, which is pushing back all Swedish invading forces from their country. And following that, what we see happening is them pushing back against the Swedish Navy, kind of close where the German Navy is, working with the Germans, who are like geographical rivals of them, but oh well. The Germans also push through this Danish area. How they meet a load of opposition around there, so they can't push beyond that point. How they do push into this area of the Baltic Sea, I don't know what these like individual small bodies of water are called. That's the Gulf of Bothnia, that's the Gulf of Finland. That's as far as my knowledge of inner Baltic Sea regions goes. These islands will hold out for the most part because they're relatively strong. A few of them fall, but it's okay. Most will fall. That's kind of an important one. And the Germans do manage to start a small scale offensive in these areas until the Swedish pushing them back a little bit and retake all those islands. We can head over to the front in France, where things are going comparatively badly for the Triangle Alliance, as the French have now lost their capital city. We were away from this front for a while, and yeah, in that time, bad things have happened. We can also see the Savoy country push up further into these northern territories, and now the French are really just a Normandy, like Greater Normandy. The Spanish have also managed to get naval dominance over most of this territory, and they're now pushing up against the English. We can also see what the English are doing at the moment, and the English are doing what the English do best, which is completely obliterating Ireland. Well, actually, I think it's colonizing, but, you know, or drinking tea maybe. Just all the stereotypes. And they're getting towards the Irish capital city when something strange happens. What's a strange thing that happens, you may say? Yeah, it's the Irish having a civil war. Well, not really a civil war, it's more of a coup. As a new government will take over an island, all of their navy will withdraw, and it's just going to go back into its harbour. The English will stay over these territories, of course. And yeah, a military dictator will take over the nation of Ireland, and that was not something the English expected. You know, they're kind of alright with it. They're like, you know what? I am fine with you guys not being in this war. So they're going to occupy a few areas. However, the Irish will start a new march onto Northern Ireland, which they weren't really expecting, and they don't really care. They don't want to occupy a load of lands full of angry Irish people, but they will trade those territories for stuff they have claims on, and the Irish don't really care about, which is the Munster territories, because this is a more like a northern-based Irish country, whilst Munster is its own separate thing. The English will also send their navies out into the North/Norwegian seas, which is definitely going to help. But the Spanish have now lost a pretty important ally, like one of the strongest countries in the world, has just fallen out of the war, and the English are advancing towards territories in Norway, and they might be about to do something that they did a while ago. We'll see if you can remember what that is, potentially. It was in another war where Sweden was majorly involved. But they take over the Faroe and Orkney Islands again, and now they're going to send out divisions to go and try and take over Iceland. Not that there's anyone fighting there, so, you know, not much point, but okay. We can also see Polish forces take the capital of the Swedish colony around here, and yeah, the Swedish will just capitulate. I mean, it's like Swedish colonial forces. The Swedish aren't entirely in control of everything that's going on around here, so this colony is going to capitulate, and so will everything else, but no one's going to go and occupy it. Like, no one's sailing up to Baffin Island to go and occupy the whole 13 people that live there. So, yeah, I'm just not going to bother colouring that in. The Polish don't entirely occupy these waters. In fact, much more accurately, it would look like this, and then probably just this. I mean, I don't really think that they care much more about occupying these territories. But there's that. The Polish are actually going to send all their troops back home from occupying this territory, whilst the Germans care significantly more and will send it over to this. How they also need a lot of the troops. So what we see happening is the Germans actually giving up a lot of their occupations to the English. So it's a really strange trading of land where the Polish generally don't do great. And in fact, what the English are going to set up is their own puppet government to just kind of occupy this territory, because they've got plans for what they want to do with Sweden if they manage to win this war, which, I don't know. It's all up in the air still. The Dutch are managing to push back against the Spanish now, because they're not so worried with what's going on at home, because, you know, they're not currently being invaded. That's kind of worrying. Oh, wait a minute. Also not really pushing around here, but they are going to retract their troops from here in Texas. This video is going to be a bit of a long one, sorry. Sorry about that, but it is what it is. Maybe it's what you like seeing. I don't know. Anyway, heading over to France. What's going to be happening to the French? Well, the French are just gradually losing more and more territory, but it is really getting quite slow for the Spanish, because the English have now landed in Normandy. Yeah, they're back in Normandy, guys. And they are starting... Oh, bother. Yeah, they're starting an offensive towards the Channel Islands. And also just in this area, trying to take over some of the French naval-controlled bits, and also push back and maybe retake Brittany for the French, not for the British. They are kind of the British now, they occupy all the British, island of Britain. That's Ireland, that's Britain. These are the British Isles. That's, I think, right. Yeah, they start to really push into the Norwegian Sea, and as they get close to the Norwegians, they send in some spies. And what those spies do? Well, they start a revolution in Norway, which wants to recreate the old Norwegian country. So that is crazy. And a few areas will start to rebel away from the Norwegians, from the Swedish, until they stop, and it goes a lot more small scale, because that was a crazy rebellion, and the Swedish just decided to kill a lot of people instead. But yeah, these major rebellions start popping up all over the areas of Norway, even in the mountains, kind of. And yeah, that's bad. Danish territories also suffer these rebellions up here as well, and now the Swedish are really, really worried about what could be happening to them. Oh, that's refreshing. It was kind of dark for a bit. They also start to lose some of these other southern territories, and we need to head over to Finland, because something interesting is happening in Finland, and I bet you can't guess what it is. It's the exact same thing, but with Finnish people. I will actually get the proper colours in a second, but a major rebellion happens here in the south, and that's the only one that happens, because there's not that many Finnish people. The Polish will also start their own invasion here into the Swedish Estonian territory, so that's cool. And they start to push up around these southern areas, taking a few major cities. The Ukrainians are also fighting here, but they're kind of just under the Polish war machine at this point. The Swedish are attracting their forces to go deal with the Finnish, and their hope is to just push back to the Ingrian area and kind of just hold the line there, which might work and might not. So Ingria is this general area of Russia. So there's that. Heading over to the Germans then, they can allow this puppet government to occupy this stuff. I need a puppet government. That's an interesting word, isn't it? Let's see what's happening over... Oh, no. They just let them have that stuff. Wow. Well, not all of it. Not quite all of it. It wouldn't look exactly like that. Because these guys do have ambitions, kind of. So it's more like... Yeah, we're just going to give you the stuff. Because, yeah, if you didn't know, because I haven't told you, the Norwegians are actually very closely linked to the Dutch in this world, in their monarchies. So they're kind of... The Triangle Alliance really likes this idea of a Norwegian state, and they start to send troops actually into Norway now, as the English manage to push their navy out onto the Norwegian coast, and it's really starting to get bad for the Swedish. The Swedish are just scampering around for troops now, because they've lost a load of people who were trying to get back from America to go defend the homeland, got caught on the way by English sailors and stuff. And the Spanish are actually being pushed back by the French, especially the Savoy country. They're doing pretty badly until something really, really bad happens, and that is the entire induction of the, whatever this alliance is called, Diamond Alliance. There we go. So Hungary and Turkey will join the war. Yeah, that's really just really, really bad, because Turkey is the second strongest country in the world, and the Spanish kind of just had hopes that maybe, we're fighting the Triangle Alliance, and then after we've beaten them, we can go fight the Diamond Alliance, and they'll all just take turns, and that'll be good. But nope, the Turkish did withhold from joining the war for a long time, but they finally decided that enough is enough, and they're going to invade Italy. This is bad. This is very bad if you're Italian. So the southern Italian country is going to get absolutely obliterated by the Turkish as they move their navy in. They also have a load of Hungarian troops with them, and yeah, now the Turks are just going to start their own invasion into Italy. So the Italians are sending some troops around to that's Bari. I don't know what's down here. This heel of Italy, and they push up the eastern coast pretty well, getting into some of these central areas. Got to remember, Hungary is also here, which is a top 20 power. The Germans start to push through some of these major islands into Swedish territory, landing near Malmo, or Malmo, wherever it is, in real life. And they also restart that offensive and take over most of Scania, which is cool. Scania is a cool looking province. These Polish take over the island of Gotland, and the Ukrainians start to restart the offensive over here. There were a few Hungarian and Turkish volunteer troops fighting with the Ukrainians, but now there's a lot because the entire military is going to help. Kind of. The Finns just rise up in absolutely huge rebellion. This isn't to actually restart their democratic government. The hope is that if they can help out these guys in this war, they'll be able to recreate their theocratic government, which they liked a lot more, strangely enough. Usually theocracies don't do great, but here they're doing pretty well. The Norwegian rebellion will also start to absolutely obliterate the Swedish, as now actual English and Dutch and German forces are fighting alongside them, and there's going to be a huge naval scuffle. It's going to be an absolute scuffle that will occur near the Swedish capital as the Polish try to send their ships in to occupy what it would be Stockholm. So they get very close to this and manage to gain naval superiority at the area. However, this is the most populated city within the entire Swedish Empire, so yeah, it's going to be kind of tricky to push into, but they'll give it a go. They're going to give it a try, and it's one of the most brutal battles in the entire war. Loads and loads of people die, so that's really, really sad, but it ends in a success for the Polish as they take this entire German area, greater Stockholm area. Let's take over the island of Ireland, which is cool. And after that, we see the capitulation of Sweden. But not to the Polish. It's more to the Norwegians. So that's... hello? Well, I just divided, but I'm going to make it more simple. So there we go. And the Swedish Navy will also capitulate, of course, and leave the... Hey, yo! And leave the war too. So that's cool. And yeah, the Germans, I suppose, will occupy lots of that. And now we can get back to the war in the south, because things are going very badly. Very, very badly. The Libyans are also, I don't know, they may be helping. In this Libya, not this one. I'm so bad at this. Sometimes they push around to Naples and down this rest of the boot of Italy and up towards the capital city, which is kind of in Rome, taking the capital city. German, Polish, Ukrainian, and other forces also make landings here in France, helping out the English as they really start to push back. Another major battle happens in southern Paris. Paris is like here, but it's close to Paris. Maybe Orleans? I don't know. And the Savoy country has lost most of its military, really. It's not in a great shape anymore. They start to push down towards Bordeaux, which is an area the Spanish spent a long time trying to occupy. And yeah, unfortunately they're losing that. And then something really, really, really bad happens to the Spanish. Their king dies. Unfortunately, he was in Bordeaux during the war, the battle where they tried to occupy the city again. And yeah, he's going to perish. He gets killed in that fight, he gets shot off his horse. And yeah, what happens to the country now? That's a good question, because nobody really knows. The king has 2 sons, so it should be kind of alright, It would just go to the eldest son. It's all clean and easy like that. I had a map, didn't I? Yeah, I'm just going to bring you... Hey, bring you back for a second. Yeah, it should be all clean and easy. However, the eldest son of this country has unfortunately lost his arm. That's something you don't hear about very often. But this guy, he was fighting a rebellion that occurred in Morocco, because the Moroccans wanted their independence, and during that battle, he lost his arm. It was blown off. That's very sad. And lots of people in the Spanish country, like, this guy cannot rule our country. He's lost his arm. That's pretty bad for being a king. So what are they going to do? Well, they're going to support the other brother who's not lost his arm. He has an arm. He's got 2, actually. The other guy's the one with only 1 arm. So, a civil war breaks out in Spain, and there's also a third party, which is the Republican Party for Spain. How strange. The Carthaginians will also join the war. I'm speeding through it now because I'm like, oh my god, this video is nearly half an hour long. Who's going to watch this? I don't know. But the Carthaginians will move into the Moroccan area, and they don't need to do a whole lot until Morocco actually just rebels away and creates its own country. Maybe not that colour, but, kind of like this, and also not in Iberia. But they retake all these islands. The Spanish Navy is basically recalled all the way back to its homeland. And yeah, I need to go into the civil war, but Spain. So in the south, we see this pinkish rebellion start, This is for the crippled guy, and yeah, it's kind of mean calling him a cripple. I don't know. I feel a bit bad saying that. And in the north, we see the second brother, the younger brother. That's where he's most predominant. And then over in the east, we have another group, which is the Republican group here in Catalonia. They want their own country. How strange! The Catalans want their country again. The French. Who's actually occupying stuff for you guys? The French, French also sent some forces into the north and occupied the island of Sardinia. I just had a freaking speech disability there for a second. The rest of these areas are grabbed up by the two warring brothers. They don't really hate each other, but at this point, they're both like, actually, I'd like to be king. So the southern one gets a bit of support from the Spanish, the Carthaginians, whilst in the north, he's getting some support from the other Europeans. They don't really know what to do. They just want to weaken Spain. Over here in the colonies, a huge combined European force is going to land in the colonies. It's kind of a while after most of the fighting's died down, so this is a bit later, but a combined European force will land in the Spanish colonies, and what they're going to do is just completely take them over. So that's surprising and really efficient. The Dutch also retake all of their territory, and I guess there's no one else fighting this war against these guys anymore. So I'm going to make a peace treaty video in a second. Yeah, thanks for watching this video. Like, subscribe, comment, and I will see you again next time. Goodbye. I hope you enjoyed the war as well. That was a really sudden ending. Yeah, goodbye.